A very warm welcome from my side. I'm Ariana Nicoletti. I'm Circular Textiles lead at Circular Berlin. And I'm super pleased to moderate through this workshop, these 4 hours today. We are very excited because we are many brilliant speakers with us, but also organizations taking part from all over the world, which, I'm very pleased with the number of participation, but also with the fact that you're really representing so many different countries and civil society from Global South and Global North. So welcome, everyone. This workshop, Collective Solution for Textile Waste, is the last session of a 1-year-long project we carried out together with the OR Foundation, which is called Ghana and Germany Paving the Way to a More Equitable EPR for Textiles. This project and this session have been organized in cooperation with the OR Foundation and also with the Bundeskanzler Helmut Schmidt Foundation, and is a project that was and is funded by Engagement Global, the Berlin Regional Office for Development Cooperation, LZ in German, and the Bundeskanzler Helmut Schmidt Foundation and the OR Foundation itself as well. In the 4 hours in front of us, we are going to give you the opportunity to learn about many of the negative impacts of secondhand textiles and textile waste export to Ghana and Kenya, but more in general also in the Global South, and also to look into practical and legislative solutions together. The day is divided into 2 parts. One is more about learning and one is about exchanging and creating synergies. Before I start with the agenda, I would like to let you know that this first more learning part is recorded. You already saw this. Actually, this is the most important part. So I don't think that your image will be shown in the recording, only the speaker image. But just in case you don't feel comfortable, you can turn off your camera now and then turn it on if you're asking a question later in the Q&A sessions. And of course, we are going to stop the recording in the workshop part so that you are more free and comfortable to speak up and exchange with the others. So just that you know. I would say let's jump into the agenda. We have a lot of points here, a lot of different inputs, and I hope we can stay within this time. Yeah, of course, we will stay within this time. To start, we are going to have an input by Branson Skinner from the OR Foundation, talking about the situation in Ghana and what they are doing as OR Foundation there to tackle the problem of textile waste, followed by a presentation by Janet Chemitei, who is based in Kenya, and she is going to give us the point of view from that country. And then I will take over again to talk about more about EPR schemes and the role of organization, producer responsibility organization within the EPR schemes. And after this big chunk of information you will get, which is already a lot, there will be a Q&A session. Of course, feel free to write your questions already during the presentations in the chat. Our colleague Josie, I mean, you will recognize us. We are a lot of people from Circular Berlin today here. So the whole textile team is actually taking part, and we all have this beautiful background. So you just you can see us quite easily, and she's taking care, Josie, of more technical part and of the chat. So if you have any difficulties, you can always write to her or to our colleague Leo. But also during the Q&A, she will share the question that she will be collecting during the input. So feel free to write already. And there will be a break, 10 minutes break after that. And then we are going to deep dive into solutions, looking at the case studies from Accra, the Kanta Keepers Market Collective, together with Samuel Oteng, Senior Community Engagement Manager at the OR Foundation, Solomon Noy, who is a Director of Waste Management at Accra Metropolitan Assembly, and also representatives from the Kanta Keepers Market Collective project. And then Branson Skinner will take over again and talk a little bit about the Stop Waste Colonialism campaign, which is a campaign that the OR Foundation is running since a couple of months, maybe already years, actually, and we'll give you the opportunity to understand how to support this campaign and how to be part of this. After that, we're going to have another round of Q&A and break, and then we go into the interactive workshop session, which is, of course, also very exciting for me to see how we are going to exchange there and see what are the formats, what are the focus that we have in our work, and how we can create synergies. And then at the end, there's still a little bit of time for feedback and final Q&A. Just very shortly about Circular Berlin. If you don't know us, we are a nonprofit organization based in Berlin, and we try to accelerate this transition of this city to a more circular one. And we do this through a variety of projects that want to build up new knowledge in different sectors, industry sectors, and different like kind of meta levels like consumption, for example. And we carry out projects that range from creating platforms for consumers to publishing studies and yeah, everything, a lot of education programs we carry out. And as well, we do community building in a way that we try to matchmake policymakers with the Berlin circular economy ecosystems, but also individuals that are interested in circular economy. We connect them within our organization and also with the ecosystem around us. One important thing about our work is that we work open source, so we really try to create like a framework for replication. So all the results of our projects are usually accessible to everyone. And if we create a website or a platform or a tool, digital tool, then we always try to have open source coding behind it so that other organizations can just download this code and reuse it the way it is, or like changing it a little bit, but so that they are enabled and empowered to do the same, but with less resources. And this project, as I say, or this session today is part of the Ghana and Germany Paving the Way to an Equitable EPR project, which is really looking into this EPR. And before we start, I think it's important like to just harmonize a little bit like the knowledge behind the words that we're going to use. And one of these is, of course, this short form for extended producer responsibility. And that's an environmental policy and also a way of extended the responsibility that producers of all kinds of products have on the end of life of their products. So is extending like this responsibility, not only to looking at how they produce their products and they bring them to the market and sell them, but also it's really about financing what is happening with these products in their end of life. These being like could be being recirculated, could be being recycled, or even just burned or landfilled, but still we need producer to take responsibility. And these extended producer responsibility legislations are already there in many countries for many sectors, but in Germany we don't have yet one for textiles, and this is the focus of our work. The objectives of our project was really like about understanding what a scenario could be for a valid textile EPR policy program that is including the Global South in the discussion, that is addressing environmental and social justice and also the problem of waste colonialism. And we did this through a first exchange trip from Ghana to Germany, in which we connected the delegation from the R Foundation with policymakers and other relevant stakeholders. And we are doing this also today with this workshop, in which we want to share the results of the project, share the content of the project, and like the aspects related to environmental and social impacts of textile waste, as well as the possibility that an inclusive EPR can bring to us and to implement a more holistic circular economy in textiles. So this workshop today is about yeah, bringing you together, NGOs, nonprofit for all over the world, giving you input, and then sparkle also the ideas and possible collaboration for working more synergically to tackle this problem. And just before I stop talking and I give the word to Branson, I would like to give you just to show you a couple of pictures from our exchange program, starting with this one, in which I'm the only one not looking in the camera, but all the others, they look fantastic. And we are in the Bundestag, the German parliament, in which we connected in a roundtable situation with some parliamentaries from Germany. And we talked about this, the problem. We had very, I think, very nice exchange. And we are, of course, following up with them, and we'll follow up with them in the next months to see how we can help them to shape this EPR policy for Germany. But also we met a lot of change makers, and we had some meetings with the circular economy ecosystem, with some different companies connected to the managing of textiles, but also some more looking at technologies and looking at the way Berlin has spaces used for circular economy. And we had many interesting exchanges of knowledge with between the delegation and this ecosystem. Also, we had some events open to the public, and we had exchanges of techniques in terms of reuse and upcycling of textiles. We brought the topic of textile waste and EPR on different stages of the Berlin Fashion Week. And at the end of the week, we created, we ran a multi-stakeholder workshop at Zalando together with around 24 participants from different backgrounds. From the fashion industry, recycling industry, we had researchers, members of more local politics, and yeah, it was a great occasion to discuss how to change EPR legislations, and I will talk a little bit more about the results later. One last picture, just to say that we reached with this week, and we connected the delegation with about 150 people, and it was a fantastic, really a fantastic experience for all of us. Yeah, and I would say if Branson is there, I don't know, maybe Laura, you have to tell me, give me a
Yep,
sign. And Branson, yeah,
I
fantastic.
am here.
Welcome, Branson. So nice to have you here. I will just stop my screen and give you the opportunity to share yours. And yeah, now I also see your picture. Nice to see you.
Let me unmute myself. You would think after years of doing the Zoom meetings, I would have figured that out. But well, thank you very much, Ariana. Thank you very much, Circular Berlin team, all of you. It's lovely to see you again here on Zoom. We had such an amazing time on behalf of the whole delegation. I know it was a really important and impactful trip, and some of what we'll discuss here today is recapping that, and some of it is taking the next step forward. So I'm incredibly grateful for all of your work organizing this, putting it together, and ensuring that there's an inclusive conversation going on around extended producer responsibility. To that end, I'll share, as you asked, Ariana, a little bit more about what we do on the ground in Accra. I'm actually today not in Accra, which is a little bit odd for me, but regardless, happy to share some of the perspective. So our organization name, I'll start there, is the OR Foundation, which for us means other. And it's about this belief that the best resistance is an alternative. And the alternative that we see to the dominating model of fashion really sits right here at Kantamanto Market in Accra, Ghana. Kantamanto is, by all accounts, one of the largest reuse, remanufacturing, repair hubs in the world. There are around 30,000 people in the singular market alone who are recirculating at least 25 million garments every month. That takes a lot of work. This means you have cut and sew of split panel shirts, you have over dyeing, you have washing, you have tailoring, resizing things, every possible imaginable process to put material back into circulation, including just selling things as they are, all the way down to completely reimagining garments and turning a shirt into boxers and things like this. It's an incredible, incredible space that is really a leader, as far as we see it, in that alternative to being able to reuse material and keep things in circulation. Yet at the same time, waste persists. So our research since 2016 has found that approximately 40% of the average bale leaves the market regarded as waste. The clothing might eventually be repurposed, some cut into rags, some may be burnt to heat water at bathhouses, some may be dumped along the roadside, eventually washing out from the gutter into the sea. Regardless of what exactly happens to each item, when every month millions of garments are not used for their intended purpose as clothing, the result has significant ecological and economic impacts. Now, I want to just pause here and focus on exactly the language that I've said, which is that 40% of the average bale leaves the market as waste, not that 40% enters the market as waste. This distinction is important because much of the policy that we will discuss later today hinges on the definition of waste and who has the right to define what is considered as waste. Our research has actually consistently found that only around 5% of material entering the market would be regarded as unwearable, meaning that the majority of what is discarded by Contomanto is actually wearable. But sellable and desirable are not the same as wearable, and waste in fashion is contextual. Fashion as an industry largely runs on manufactured desire. So as we will discuss later on, the definition of clothing waste as we see it has much more to do with economic decisions of supply and demand than the material criteria of wearability. Whoops. For us, this culminates here, where the end of the line is in Accra. We donate garments in Europe and the US, throughout the world, thinking that there isn't a way. Well, in Accra, there are two truths, but there is no way. The enormous potential of reuse, repair, and remanufacturing to be that alternative that we so desperately need. That's one of those truths, as I spoke to. At the same time, we see why the industry so desperately needs that alternative. When you place a garment in that bin, it is sent to the away. But Accra is the end of the line. There's no further away. So what it evidences is that there's both the problem and the solution. For us, that is where we come up with this idea that the end of the line is in fact the beginning of the circle. And this is really where EPR can push in to catalyze circularity. So what are we doing about it as an organization? Well, we've been operating in Ghana since 2011 at the intersection of education, environmental justice, and fashion development to catalyze a justice-led circular textiles economy. Our programmatic focus areas are threefold. One, we look at crisis relief as the basis of transformation and justice. Two, we look at material and economic transformation. And three, we look at research and advocacy, much of what is bringing us here today, but that is informed, as I'll discuss, by those first two program areas. So just jumping in, Contomanto market is functions based on a labor system that is exploitative, that is quite destructive. This young woman here is carrying a 55-kilogram bale of clothing on her head. Now, our research that we conducted in partnership with a chiropractor in Accra has identified over the course of hundreds of x-rays that labor, called head carrying, colloquially known as kayeye, which means literally she who carries the burden, causes irreversible spinal degradation after just 2 months on the job. So this, for us, is the first entry point of relief. We are, whoops, I keep clicking too quickly in my slides, my apologies. We are creating one of the largest apprenticeship programs, paid apprenticeship programs for young women who've been working as kayeye. We run this program that has so far helped transition over 250 women out of head carrying into sustainable and dignified livelihoods through job training programs, through wraparound education, such as, for instance, here, self-defense class, also sexual reproductive health class, financial literacy courses, really looking at wraparound services, including health treatment, including housing, to create a transformative situation. But again, coming from that point of crisis relief, of trying to literally relieve the burden of head carrying. We also see that the market does not have the standard safety systems that one would think of for a global flagship of reuse. In fact, in 2020 and 2022, following years actually previously of multiple fires, we've been able to intervene when parts of the market have burnt, with a relief program distributing over $500,000 in crisis relief to people who have lost their livelihoods or their source of livelihoods due to market fires. And that, of course, is coming in after the fact, but we've also been able to install as part of that relief work over 500 fire extinguishers, train over 500 people in their use. And actually in the last year alone, that has quenched 7 fires. So that's preventing crisis, which creates the groundwork for transformation. And now that transformation that's really necessary, both in terms of head carrying and in terms of fire relief, in terms of creating a sustainable and dignified marketplace, looks also at infrastructure. So when those crisis points are able to be supported and people are able to come into the conversation and think about long-range transformation, this is where that thought process takes us. We are working right now with the city of Accra. We're working right now with market leadership from across Continental to identify how to upfit parts of the market, in the long range, the entire thing, so as to eliminate the need for dangerous head carrying and to address the concerns of fire safety, of flooding, and make it a place to carry forward reuse, repair, and remanufacturing well into the future. Of course, changing the packaging doesn't really mean much if we don't change the underlying business practices taking shape within that packaging. So this is where our material transformation work comes into place. We collect material throughout the market that is regarded as waste, and we transform that into things from recycled mops made in Accra, including with recycled plastic that we've designed locally, furniture products. This is quite simple, just taking the textiles as they are and putting them back into different uses if they're no longer wearable. We also are then transforming the textiles through the process of a locally built shredder into things like fiberboard for this table, for instance. We also have hangers. We also have actually speakers, which I don't have a good image of here, but we're really excited about the product as we're growing that potential. And we are also looking at longer range industrial scale transformation of fiber to fiber recycling. So this is the image of a container that we loaded up to send to a pilot program outside of Ghana to test the technology. All of that work doesn't really mean much if we can't clean up the mess that's already there. So this is where our research comes into play and connects in with our advocacy work. This is an image of our sampling team along the Corley Lagoon, and in the back you'll see a dump site that is really one of the principal unsanctioned sites where material leaving the market as waste ends up. Again, there is no way. This is it. It does not magically disappear. So we have collected over 3,000 water and air samples over the last 2 years, which has informed, as we analyze this, it has informed some of our interventions. Now, just to pause here and explain what we see, this is a sample of, I believe it's 20 milliliters of water pushed through a fiberglass filter. Everything that is blue, which is fluorescing UV light, is essentially a plastic microfiber or plastic microplastic. Everything that is red or yellow essentially is a cellulosic microfiber. So you can see that in 20 milliliters of water, the pollution that is leaching off of these dump sites into water systems right into the ocean is quite severe. And this is where our cleanup efforts come in as part of our research work, as part of our material transformation work, is also part of our advocacy work, informing how much damage there is to be repaired and how we can design systems that will hold people accountable for that repair work. So here we are conducting a beach cleanup, which we do every single week. At this point, actually, we're removing over 20 tons of textile waste and other plastics off of the beach every week. We are also removing this from gutter systems that exit the market. This is an area which we are looking to transform through our bioremediation work and our decomposition work into a regenerative ecosystem using nature-based design principles, essentially bioremediation right on site to clean water as it is exiting the market, to put clean water back into the lagoon. Now, in the best case scenario, none of that material is hitting the environment to begin with. And this is where the Kanta Keepers Waste Collective program that you mentioned, Ariana, is coming into place. So we've been working with the various different market associations over the last year and a half to organize the largest cooperative of waste pickers within the market, who go around every single day, pick material that is regarded as waste into these bags, offload that into a truck that is operated by the city of Accra, which you will hear about later today, and we haul that to a sanctioned dump site so that it is not ending up in the ocean, that it is not getting burnt. Of course, that's not the best long-range solution. We all want to see this put back into use somehow, but right now, this is the reality. This is what we're able to do. And we can use this information, to how much we're pulling off the beach, how much we're collecting in the market, the costs of all of this, the costs of transforming this material, the costs of managing the material in the market, to inform policy. So all of that research comes together for us into our policy advocacy position, which has been our Stop Waste Colonialism campaign, which we launched in November of 2022. Here actually is an image in Brussels last year, where we brought yet another delegation to meet with members of the parliament, as well as DG Environment and other members of the Commission, other NGOs. I think actually there are a few of you in this audience today who might have been at this event and other events that we've hosted. We've also expanded this research, and I wave to Janet, I know you've taken part in this, to other markets in receiving countries around the world. So we've actually worked with worked with researchers in 19 different countries to compile sort of a similar snapshot of what some of the challenges are that people are facing as they manage this material that is flowing out of the global north into the global south. All of that has come together in this campaign, Stop Waste Colonialism, which has been endorsed by the mayor of Accra and many of members of her team, as you'll hear from later. And this is where I will leave off to come back to this afternoon. I guess it is already afternoon there, but in an hour or two. And I look forward to taking your questions and discussing in more detail then.
Thank you, Branson. Thank you so much. It's also exciting to see how much you developed already in this couple of months. We did not speak like the Cantamanto market new project, and of course also the new materials. They're fantastic, and the new products that are made out of this. And yeah, I would now we talk with you later again, but I would give the possibility to Janet Chemitei, who is also with us, to give the input from Kenya, to share her screen. And in the meantime, I will just introduce her. Janet is an environmentalist and a waste and slow fashion educator, passionate about storytelling through writing and content creation. Janet has worked with organizations like Global Landscapes Forum Nairobi chapter, Planet One Ubunifu Hub, and Greenpeace Africa to empower local community youth groups on climate justice, restoration, and advocacy. Beyond her work in the field, Janet is the youth chairperson for Clean Up Kenya and serves as Africa Regional Director for Threading Change. Thank you so much, Janet, for joining us. And yeah, I'm excited to hear your presentation. So I give it over to you.
Thank you so much. So I think I'll switch off my video just in case it interferes with my presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'll get right into my presentation. And the focus of my presentation is more on what the different initiatives are doing in Kenya to tackle the excessive amount of clothes that we receive through their different work. And I'll start with a brief introduction of our market. It's called Gikomba Secondhand Market, and it's based in Nairobi, and it's the largest secondhand market in Kenya. And we receive clothes like in bells, and we call this bells mitumba, which basically means bells. And it's an open air market and employs roughly at up to 100,000 people, but there's no accurate data that would actually suggest that this is the amount of people that work there, and it consists of different people, from traders to upcyclers, people who iron clothes, hawkers, people who sell food like in cafes and like in the street. And I'm saying that we don't have an accurate number or representation of the people who work there just because it's an informal market, and the county government is yet to like seriously look into it and to understand how the ecosystem works. And the market goes way back to like the 1960s when we started to receive clothes in the form of donations to go towards people who could not afford could not afford buying new clothes, and it has just been growing ever since. And the more the market grew, the more it moved towards the river. There's a river called the Nairobi River that passes right next into the market, and structures in the market like stalls where people iron clothes and do the alterations have set up there. And so everything that is done, like all the textile offcuts that are made when the clothes are being upcycled or altered, unfortunately end up on the bank of the river or in the river itself. And one thing that keeps affecting the people who work in the market is they live in constant fear of, fires coming out, or the county government wanting to demolish the property just because it's next to the river. And so it just has all this risk. But the problem is that when all these things happen, it's a good thing to, be away from an important ecosystem like rivers. But the problem is that the government doesn't really talk to the people and find alternatives for them. So they just like wake up one day and, they want to shift the market. And so the people who work there don't understand or don't know what their next move is. And this is just a picture of some time when a fire happened in the market, and just people woke up and most of their goods were damaged and they could not be able to move past that. And a lot of the textile waste in the market mostly comes from clothing alterations. So tailors doing like upcycling in the market, and we don't have proper places where this waste can be taken into. So more often you see a lot of offcuts on the floor of the market or in the river, at the banks of the river, like the stations where these tailors and traders are working in. And sometimes you will come across people who will try to collect some of the offcuts to either feel like for their businesses, like people who make sofas. And then also there are people who make moppers, the one that you use to mop your house with, but they have to collect specific offcuts, like if it's made from wool or cotton, just because it's made of like fabrics that are more absorbent than synthetic fibers. And so the reason why I haven't talked much about, like the amount of clothes that come into the country and whatnot is that you'll be able to find all that information outside there. But there's not much information that talks about, like just how much of the clothing that comes is undesirable, and so it cannot be sold. So it either ends up as waste in the dump site, or just in the communities in the market, or are unsold. And most of the clothes that we get in the market, when then they're not sold, they're sold for like really cheap prices. And some people come to buy them and then they either go sell it up country or use it for other things, but you can't really know exactly what happens to these clothes that don't get unsold. And so I would really love to have like a dedicated team or organization that wants to know like the full circle of what really happens to these clothes. And a lot of the research that we currently have in Kenya is that it's centered around selfish reasons. Like people don't want to accept that as much as the Mitumba ecosystem can be helpful because we are in like a reuse and like trying to extend the life of clothes, but it also has impacts on communities and the environment, and that we need to ask for better. And so the research will mostly just focus on like the economic benefits and refuse to acknowledge that there are other impacts that come with the trade as well. And we don't have like a proper textile waste management structure in the market. And and also in my opinion, I think if we don't take time to educate people to understand why we're trying to advocate for better textile waste management system, or like just a proper secondhand supply chain system, then we really want to get anywhere. And then we also just need to find a way that we can move together and work together, like do all this cleanup services and provide upcycling and recycling services as well in the market and outside of the market. And in the market would be really important because that's where a lot of the clothes come in, and like there's a lot of circulation that happens in there. And then there's really a lack of focused on how textile waste is impacting communities and people who live and work around the market, because there are people who live there and they depend on the river, and like they buy their food around there. That's where they live. And sometimes textile waste is burned in like small heaps in the market and like around the market. So there's just a lot of impact that happens, and we don't know the extent of that. And so now I'll move into what different initiatives are doing in Kenya to extend the life of clothes. And I'm going to feature 3 amazing initiatives. And one of them is Maisha by Nisria. They're located about 2 hours away from Nairobi. And I love that they're trying to bring more youth to learn about sustainable fashion, and like how they can use the already existing clothes to make something instead of just doing like the old fashion design way of making clothes. And they source most of their materials from secondhand markets around where they're based, and also from Gikomba market. And then Baziwa market is like a factory, or like a company where they buy like this kind of like new fabrics, but they buy like the offcuts that have not been used. And then they also do a lot of clothing donation drives. So they ask people to donate what they don't wear anymore, and they also pick textile waste from other designers. And one of the projects that they do is mentoring young people, and then integrate them into their program after they're done, depending, of course, on the interest of the interns. And then they also have other amazing projects. And I think what I like is that they're trying to not only build like a conscious community, but they're also trying to nurture them and see how they can contribute to this other wave of the fashion industry. And they also try to work with other people in the industry to uplift them and give them like a better livelihood. And their project is mostly funded by their parent organization. And when I talked to them, they mentioned that since the parent organization is based in the UAE, so then and with how the situation has been happening in the world right now, so it's a bit hard to continue funding their project. So now they're trying to do a lot of like grant writing, and like just trying to get funds for themselves from right here in Kenya. The second initiative is called Mabatini Studio, and they create one-off pieces from upcycling, and they also mostly just buy from the secondhand market. And we have a lot of thrift stores in Nairobi, and it's it's a small team, and so their projects are quite small, and also just because they can only fund their business and their projects through the sales that they make. So it's a bit difficult to expand and also like be able to access funds that is sustainable for their businesses. And then the last initiative that I'm going to focus on is Africa Collect Textile, and it's the only textile recycling company that we have in Kenya. And they're trying to build a circular textile and fashion industry locally, both in Kenya and in Nigeria. And they do their work by asking for clothes from people's homes, just because a lot of people don't know how to properly dispose of the clothes that they don't want to wear anymore. And then they also partner with a number of security companies to just because most of these companies, after that, the cycle of the uniforms are done, they either ban them or just throw them away. So they're trying to divert that from landfill and from incinerations. And they're involved in a lot of projects. And as I mentioned earlier, all three of these businesses are really just focused on not only elevating or diverting textile waste away from landfills, but they're also trying to build a community of conscious citizens, which I think is really amazing. And they need our support in doing that. And ACT is mostly funded from grants, convertible loans, and equity investment. But this is not enough, or will not be able to grow their businesses at scale, just because it really takes a lot for upcycling and recycling businesses. And it's an important thing that everyone is doing in this space. And unfortunately, no one wants to pay for it. So I really love that the OR Foundation is trying to push for that and be able to ensure that initiatives in Africa and the global South are see the kind of work that they're doing, and to show that we really need the support and the money needed to carry out this work. And just as I wrap up, I talked to a waste management company, and some of the waste that they collect also includes textile waste, and they don't know what to do with it because there's no textile recycling company yet in Kenya that has the infrastructure that can be able to recycle these fibers. And since it's already been mixed with like all the other types of waste, then it's really difficult to get into recycling. So having an initiative that is focused on ensuring that these clothes then don't get to a point where we can't be able to recover them. Yeah, it's an incredible thing, and I'm just so excited that we are having this conversation and that we are bringing the conversations back to basically where clothes end up to be forgotten. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Janet. So I invite everyone, to connect with Janet, but still, I mean, she's going to be with us the whole day, but nice that you put your contacts and your channel so that the participants can just add you right now and start following your fantastic work. So I will close up this session of inputs with one last input from our side on the role of PROs in EPR schemes. Don't worry, I'm going to introduce what a PRO is. The PRO is the Producer Responsibility Organization, and this is an entity that is very central to the to EPR schemes. So is actually the central organization that is gathering the fees, so gathering the flow of money coming from the taxation connecting to the EPR schemes from that the producers, importers, and brands have to pay, and is managing this money actually and making this money flow into paying for waste management operations, which is collection, sorting, recycling, and recirculation of textile waste. This system which is very nice represented here by the WWF website, is called Collective Responsibility System. Every EPR is actually usually also given the possibility for an individual responsibility system, so that every producer can also decide to implement their own individual take-back system and also make their own contracts with all the actors connected to the waste management operations. But usually, at least what we see in Germany, is that the producers, they prefer actually to take part into this scheme, collective responsibility scheme, in which they pay PRO, and the PRO is then managing the money and really looking at the end of use. And the role of the PRO is depending from the different EPR and the different kind of products we are looking at, of course, is a bit different, but more in general, we chose to show you like this model from the packaging EPR in Germany. It has central functions that are very similar for most of the different EPR schemes. So they actually are responsible for identifying and registering all companies that are legally obliged to be part in the EPR. They set the amount of the EPR fees, so they decide how much the producers are going to pay, and they collect this money as well. And they make contracts with the collection, sorting, and recycling companies. So they are also responsible for actually, really put this money into use. And what they do is then reporting directly to the controlling authority, which you find on the top left, which of course tries also to create transparency around how this money has been used. And the producers that you find on the top left, the bottom left, sorry, is actually registered with the controlling authority, is registered to the PROs, but they are not, as you see, like all the steps of the real waste management are not touching the producer. They're just really connected to the PROs. Something else that the PROs is in their role is that they are bridging between all these actors, so which is very interesting because it makes them also like these kind of advisors in this sector. So they advise, for example, producers in maybe creating packaging that is more sustainable, looking at the regulations, or that is more adaptable to the recycling technologies that are out there. But also they advise the controlling authority. So they advise also the environmental agencies in implementing regulations that are beneficial then for all these actors that are part of the EPR scheme. I told before that we've been hosting actually and running a workshop in Berlin in summer at Zalando. This was a multi-stakeholder workshop, including actors from the fashion industry, recycling, different stakeholders, also research, and local politicians. And during this workshop, we've been looking at creating together a kind of scenario for a different kind of EPR that is really inclusive of the global south, and looking at the needs, environmental and social needs in a more holistic way. And one part of our discussions were around what these PROs should look like in a more equitable EPR. And it was quite interesting because the groups envisioned these PROs to work in a more decentralized way, allowing really more flexibility for local adaptation of actions. And they also envisioned the governance of these organizations to be inclusive of all stakeholders and region involved, which is a very important topic, because these organizations, these PROs, they also have a board of members. And if in the board of members of the PRO, we only have brands, for example, in the textile sector taking part, of course, this brand will lobby for to push certain aspects of the work of these PROs. Now we need a very equitable representatives of all of civil society actors, as well as organizations coming from all over the world, all the regions that are then impacted by this legislation. And also, one result was about what to prioritize in European, like what these PROs in Europe should prioritize, and so the result was that collection and sorting should be prioritized in our countries, whereas maybe other activities such as upcycling or recycling could be more supportive and could happen also in other parts of the world. And very key there is the fact that, of course, it is important to set up a process and a system in which funds can flow from Europe, from Germany, also to the countries of the Global South. And I remember at the end of this workshop, we were just sitting on a round together with the R Foundation, our team, the R Foundation. It was at the end of our exchange week, and we were like having like a feedback round and looking at what are the next steps for us to collaborate. And one idea that came, or like inspiration that came from the R Foundation was, yeah, wow, this was actually quite interesting to hear, like how the role of this PRO is central, and yeah, how actually we can actually impact this part of the EPR scheme, because if we impact how the governance and the structure of PROs is, of course, we also impact the legislation itself. And so we decided to start looking at how to have PROs, how these PROs should look like in a more equitable legislation that takes account of all actors and all regions in the world. And so we did a kind of review of. We started from researching on how German PROs are set up. It's a very extensive research that mainly was carried out by Leo, our colleague, and so I just give you a short glimpse into it, but you can, yeah, feel free to ask questions later, and I try to go to not overwhelm you with this. So we looked at the 3 EPRs that we already have in power in Germany, which is the one of packaging, electronics, and batteries. And all 3 follow German law. They are structured with the German law, but they have always a European umbrella law on top. Only for the packaging, Germany was very pioneering. In 1991, they already had EPR for packaging before the European law came otherwise, and this is also for textiles. The European framework always comes first, and then the different member countries, they implement their own legislation looking at this framework. And in Germany, the EPRs are structured in this way that the Ministry of Environment, of course, is creating the legislation. Then the Federal Environmental Agency is implementing this legislation and supervises different registry that are, the PROs are registering to this registry. So we have 2 registry here. One is the central foundation for packaging registry, of which we have around 12 PROs that are registered there. And this registry supervises actually the work of the PROs. So the PROs have to be registered there, and they have to report there, and to be compliant to the framework that the Federal Environmental Agency is giving. And so this is the role of the registry. And then we have a second registry for used electronics, and this covers both the electronics EPR and the battery. So the PROs that are electronics PROs or the batteries PROs, they are both connected to this one central registry. And just to mention here, there's no really transparency on the number and the names of these PROs. So we researching on it, we found a barrier, like, okay, we found about 11 for electronics and 10 for batteries, but there's no formal official information around the amount of these organizations. And when we look at how the system of PROs can work or can be set up at let's say a country level, we can have two main models. These names are more linked to the electronics of EPR in Germany, but they can be applied to all the other EPRs. So we have the clearinghouse model. It is a model in which you have a central organization, and then you have multiple PROs that have single contracts with different actors of the waste management. Is a more competitive model, whereas there's also another model that is called national collective model, in which there's one single organization, which is also PRO, or a little group of PROs working closely together that provide unified kind of approach, in which there's all producers are registered to this one central PRO, and the PRO is then connected to all the stakeholders for the waste management. And this one national collective model is more applicable in smaller countries. We find it, for example, for electronics in the Netherlands, Estonia, and Belgium, whereas the other model is more used in bigger countries. When we look at textiles, we see that at the moment, the only two countries that have PROs in charge of managing the fees coming in, we have national collective systems. So there's always one PRO that is a non-profit and that is managing the whole financial flow. In Sweden, they planned a clearinghouse, so a more competitive collective system, but it's not yet official how many PROs will take part. This is just a little visualization of how it looks like in France, where this refashion non-profit is this one single non-profit PRO, and they are connected and have relationships with all the stakeholders around. The model that we will have in Germany is, of course, not clear yet. We also ask the governmental department that is working on this legislation, and at the moment the answer is we are not yet working on this, and there's no update on how we will structure the EPR scheme for textiles in Germany, as there's no framework there from Europe yet, from the European Union. So they're waiting from this main framework and the European Union level to be then to start working on it. But they already carried out a study in 2023 on different models, and they individualized, as they define these two models as the ones that will be applied, one or the other. And so they also have this competitive system model or clearinghouse model, in which there's the register, but then you have different PROs competition, and the producer have to choose with which PRO they're going to work. Or you have the national collective model, or also called producer responsibility model, in which there's one single PRO in the center, and all the producers are going to have contracts with this one PRO, and the PRO has single contracts with then the waste management actors. And one last point here is about money. I think it's very important to talk about money and to talk about how much actually these companies are paying at the moment for the processing of the waste management. And it's very difficult to find transparent information. It's extremely challenging to get to this information and to have average numbers. But what we did is we could at least look at the numbers of one PROs for each of these three sectors, EPR schemes. So we talked with one packaging waste PRO, and we discovered that the price per kilo per year is about €1 per kilo. It very much depends on the kind of material content that this packaging contains. For the electronic waste, it's much, much lower, is about 6 cents of euro per kilo, and the battery waste is about 90 cents per kilo. But still, I mean, this is numbers that we found now from 3 different actors, but it's impossible to find a transparent list of prices and fees in this sector. So we then looked at the textiles part, and there's in France companies that produce or bring to the market less than 5,000 items a year, or company that they cannot declare the products to be sustainable or eligible for eco-modulation. They pay around 50 cents per item. Whereas if the companies are bigger and they bring, I mean, they don't have to be bigger, but if they declare volumes of items brought to the market that are higher than 5,000 items, or if the items they sell, they're eligible for eco-modulation, which means they are more sustainable, then these prices are sinking so much so that they really, you can see now how less they pay per item, which is also something that we cannot understand the logic behind, while, for example, why a company that declares volumes, small volumes, and bring to the market very small volumes, they have to pay more from a company or an importer or producer that brings to the market such high volumes. They actually, I think, should almost be taxed more than the small brands. But yeah, if we look at the Netherlands, there's still a preliminary fee that is linked to the EPR for textiles. Is now 10 cents per kilo, which is also very low, because a kilo, you can imagine, can be like 2 to 4 items of clothing, so it makes it very low per item. They're going to adapt this fee for 2025 to probably 24 cents per kilo, which is a bit higher, but not enough. So if we look at what the OR Foundation calculated on fees that are actually needed to actually have effective waste management systems in the global north and in the global south, these costs are adding up to 50 cents of dollars to $2.50 per item. So we are not yet there yet. So there's a lot of work to be done in policy advocacy here as well, so that these fees are actually fitting to actually the financial model of what will be done with this money. And I think I stop it here, because very technical information, and I open up the room for questions.
There's already a question from the chat that I'd like to share. That was shared by Ocean, by Maker from Ocean now. It's a question for both Janet and Branson, and they asked that when you speak about decision makers in politics in the EU and or decision makers in politics in Ghana or Kenya about the problems caused by ultra fast fashion waste trade, what are their reactions?
I can jump in on that first. Maybe just sort of set a little bit of the context of some of the different responses, but the consistent thing that we hear, which I want to touch on later in more detail, and is why I focused on this question of wearability versus saleability. So the most common response that we hear is, well, we just need to sort clothes better, and therefore there will be no waste. That is not pragmatically at all the reality. Because as you've pointed to with the question of ultra fast fashion, and I think, Ariana, as you pointed to with the very low value on EPR fees, something that is originally created that has essentially no value is not going to have value when it's recirculated, regardless of if it is wearable or not. And that is where I think right now there's a little bit of a disconnect between regulations and conversation around, particularly that's been occurring in France, around new clothing coming into the market, coming into the French or European market as new versus the export of that material. And I would just push back on folks who say, well, sorting is the solution, to say that if you've acknowledged that material is too cheap coming in and that's undercutting prices and that clearly has environmental consequences and so on and so forth, then the exact same thing is the case for anything that's being exported into the reuse trade. And so we have to apply the same thinking, that this isn't even about the question of the garment, this is about the question of the cost and the price. So I'll pause there, as I'll pick up on this more, but perhaps Janet as well, you might want to add.
So everything you've said, we also just get a lot of that here. But one thing about the Kenyan, say, government, for example, because we do have an environmental agency, but fashion is not something that is of importance to them. So they don't really, it's not an area that they're particularly interested in having a conversation on. But I think that in the last 1 year that has been changing, and we can even see in the way that they're trying to also talk about textiles when they have events like during World Environment Day. They do try to talk about textiles, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And there's no one that I can think of at the top of my head in those agencies or in the government that particularly wants to push conversations around fashion and how we can just collectively work together or see what's missing and who they can work with. So there's a lot of there's a really big gap, but the different initiatives that exist and other individuals in the space as well are really trying to build relationships with this politicians and the agencies to try to change their minds and see how we can have a more specialized and focus when it comes to fashion in Kenya.
Are there more questions from the audience? You can feel free to speak up. Just unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, I would pick on this topic and just ask something, because I was wondering, as the problems in Ghana and Kenya are so similar, like these problems linked to textile waste, are there organizations that are working over the country borders and actually collaborating in these two countries? And are the governments also maybe collaborating on this topic, or other agencies, governmental agencies that are involved in cross-country kind of programs?
For Kenya, I would say there are a lot of organizations that are trying to work together and find the similarities of how the industry works in the countries, but without the engagement of governments or the agencies, then it really doesn't, it's moving at a really slow pace. And there's something I wanted to say, but I've forgotten. But yeah, so yeah, there are a lot of people that work together, and we try to involve the agencies as much as we can. But one thing that is really helpful is the involvement of some embassies. For example, I know the Danish embassy is trying to work a lot with the Kenyan agency to try to talk about textiles and the circular economy. But again, a lot of work goes into that, and unless the government or the agencies really want to take it up, then it's going to take a really long time for us to be on the same page.
So if I can just add a little bit more on this, because I think it sets the stage for what you'll hear after the break with Engineer Noy. One of the I think challenges that we face in Ghana is that management of waste is done on the municipal level, as is generally everywhere. It's a municipal question. But policy in terms of import-export, in terms of customs inspection, in terms of international trade agreements is done on the international level, or the national central government level, as it were, in Ghana. So I think that bridging that gap is a necessary step. It's something that we've been working on, and I will say that there are some international organizations that do warrant note on this specifically. UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, has created with the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation in Ghana the Circular Economy Center of Excellence, excuse me, for which we at the OR Foundation are a participating organization, and I think that's really aiming to bridge across the various players, so to speak. Also, UNEP, I see Nico here, so hi Nico. UNEP is definitely conducting some research to inform, which we're also supporting on, to inform from different perspectives across receiving regions, which I think is necessary to your point, Ariana, of how do we create cohesion across the receiving regions. But I also think it's important to understand the diversity of practices, because while Kenya and Ghana, in many ways, Janet, as you're speaking, in my experience, in Nairobi was, wow, I feel like it's sort of weird. I feel like I'm walking through Kantamanto, but it's in a different place. At the same time, there's also there are different practices taking shape in different areas, and it is important to not apply a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's why I think the best that we can do and what we're aiming toward is bringing real nuance and detail in, grounded in perspective of hands-on tangible work.
Thank you, Branson, and Janet, for your answers. And I really believe that there are so many bridges that can be built. And there's one further question, but I will, from Robin, I will just keep it for the next round of questions, because we are going to talk about financing models and so on. I think in the presentation of the Stop Waste Colonialism campaign. So I would say we take 5 minutes of breaks instead of 10, if it's okay for everybody. And we meet here again at 15:21. We restart, and then we will restart again with Branson, Solomon Noy, Samuel Oteng, and representatives from the Kanta leadership. So yes, see you in 5 minutes. And sorry, Robin, we just skip your question for the next Q&A round. It's not forgotten, it's there, and we're going to address this. Thank you. See you in a second. Hi, everyone. Welcome back from the break. So I'm very excited about hearing more about this case study of Kanta Keepers Market Collective that Branson already shortly mentioned in his presentation. And not sure to whom to give the mic over to. I don't know if Semi will take over from this point.
Yes, that will be.
Hi, Semi. Yeah, perfect. Do you want to share any presentation or?
Yeah, it's just going to be a dialogue, so there's no.
Okay, perfect. Then I just stop sharing so that people can see you bigger. Great. Nice to have you here. Please go ahead.
All right, so just a little bit of introduction. It's going to be me, myself, Sami Oteng. I am the Senior Community Engagement Manager here at the OR Foundation. And I have with me Educhum Atta, who is also a leader, a section leader in Kantamanto Market, and also manages several sections in the market as well. And I believe Solomon, Mr. Solomon Noy, I see him, I don't know if he can join us, but he's also here. He's the Waste Management Director at the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, which is the municipal government body that we are working in collaboration with on Kanta Keepers. Now, before I go on, I just want to give like a little insight on what Kanta Keepers is, and then we can go on with a few questions for manager here, Mr. Duchom, and then Mr. Solomon Noy. So Kanta Keepers started off as an initiative to help support the waste management in Kantamanto Market. So Kantamanto Market is, for a very long time, has been managing its own waste for a very, very long time with support from the local government. But as Solomon, who is here, may add on, the way that the waste management system is built in a city is mainly to take care of domestically produced waste, domestically generated waste. And it turns out that the waste that is in Kantamanto is not generated locally. It's waste coming from other parts of the world, basically the global north. So we thought about it in collaboration with the AMA, Mr. Solomon to be specific, to think through how we can work collectively to improve the waste management in Kantamanto. Because even though Kantamanto is a second-hand textile market, there's still a lot of other produce that are sold in the market. So there's food, there's paper, and all of these things. But how do we work together so that we are collecting the waste and having source separation, so that even if there is a way to reuse this textile garment, we don't have like, a t-shirt mixed with avocado and then palm oil. So Mr. Solomon here, who is on, I'll just like ask him to speak a little bit about how the waste management, or the Kanta Keepers as it is, ties into the city's bigger goal of waste management in Accra. Mr. Solomon, are you there?
Sammy, I'm here. Come again,
Okay.
what did you say?
Okay, sorry. So I was asking if you could share a little light about how the Kanta Keepers project generally ties into the city's bigger goal for waste management.
Excellent. So that's it. I heard it, but for once I thought it was the Kanta Keepers leadership that you wanted him to react. Yes, so good afternoon to everybody here in Accra. Like Branson rightly said, the implementation of managing waste happens to rest with the municipality, like a city authority like ours. And so we found long ago that mixing our waste together isn't something that will help us if we want to go the circular model of managing waste. So as far back the year 2022, the city mayor launched what we call source separation of municipal solid waste, and which we rolled out, and we are currently in phase 1, which is sensitization, education, and piloting. But fortunately or unfortunately, we knew what to do with the other streams of waste, such as the organics, the paper, the cans, whether ferrous or non-ferrous metals, and then the plastics. But the main challenge we face as a city was what to do with textile waste. Because for textile waste, if you take it to the dump site or the landfill site, it chokes the landfill at an exponential rate. If you do not, and you want to also process it, like Sammy rightly said, definitely it is mixed, and no investor worth his salt or entrepreneur will spend a lot of money trying to wash these garments before processing. So fast forward, getting the Kanta Keepers program tied in very swiftly with our city plans of source separation, in the sense that we now have the section of the city which produces almost 99.9% of textile waste, source separating the textile waste right at the market. And so what this means is that, yes, currently we are looking at various technological means of making sure that we are able to process these textile waste, whether the trimmings or whether the discarded materials. And if we want to go the mechanical means of recycling, definitely we need to get these materials in a manner that can be clean enough to go through the mechanical processing of recycling. So yes, we are very good to go with the Kanta Keepers, and as a city, the only thing that we need to do is to make sure that we deal with the leadership of the Kanta Keepers for them to form what we call a cooperative. Once the cooperative is formed with the leadership in place, then the city will go ahead and sign memorandum of understanding and agreements with them, and even give them concessions at the markets to make sure that they are a reliable source of feedstock when it comes to getting clean textile waste for onward processing, whether mechanical or other means of fiber to fiber processing. So that's it. And we are rightly on course. We are sure Sammy and his team have liaised with our Department of Cooperatives that are making sure that they get the needed procedures in place to make sure that this is done. And then we take it up at the city level. And then from there, the necessary logistics, then we can also incorporate them into our bylaws as a city authority. So we will now have Kanta Keepers that are playing specific role and function of making sure that we get our textile waste so separated. And our ultimate aim and objective here is to make sure that no discarded clothing or textile clothing is left unattended to for it to flow back through the open drains into the ocean waters. And once that is done, it is a sure way of making sure that our beach cleanup activities that the All Foundation is very much into every week goes on very well. Because for me, from where I sit, there's no point in doing beach cleanups if we do not put in place measures like this to make sure that we stop the intrusion or infiltration of more materials that are discarded into the ocean. So once we block that upstream on land, then definitely we will target the beachfront and get them off, and also get innovative ways of getting devices right into the ocean waters to clear whatever has been discarded at the ocean bed, and those that are floating within the ocean itself. You saw the laboratory results that Branson just shown, where you can see the fibers, and microfibers for us is killing. A lot of research are going on that are suggesting that consumption of microfibers, either through bioaccumulation or biomagnification of the fishes that we also consume, and that is impacting very negatively on our health. And so for me, programs like the Kanta Keepers to get a solution to make sure that no more waste or textile waste flows into the ocean is okay. And then from there, we'll roll out other packages to deal with plastics. For plastics, that should come at the ministerial level, like Branson said, policy-wise, we don't come in, but we'll put much pressure to bear on them once we solve the textile one, and then also make sure that we prevail on them to also introduce some form of restrictions on the type of production to be done in terms of plastic waste that will not go to negate whatever gains we have chalked. Whilst doing that, we are also mindful of the polyesters, polyamides that are always increasing in numbers in our textile waste stream. And together, we'll find better means of processing them once they come clean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Solomon. So I'd like to also give the space to Mr. Duchum here, who is a market session leader and has been played a big role in the conception and execution and running of the Kanta Keepers program. So, Sadichum, can you just share a little bit about how this program has been so far and how it has supported the community in terms of waste management and then, issues with flooding and things like that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sammy. Like Solomon just said, textile waste is a major problem. Kantamanto, for that matter, as in Accra here. As you are aware, Kantamanto deals mostly with textile waste, and the consequences that at the end of the day, most of the materials are not good. Some are scattered. We cut them, making a lot of waste. So at the end of the day, in the market, you cannot have even a leg to step on because all the market is flooded with textile waste. And so our foundation and Kantamanto community and AMA as a government agency, we came together to find a solution to that problem. And so this gave birth to Kanta Keepers, and that we gave ourselves 6 months as a pilot. And I think it ended in September. And so when we look back, it has helped the community. Now, if you go to Kantamanto, formally, you will not, like I said, you see the textile waste scattered all over the place. Now you cannot see them. How does that has come about is that at the end of the day, every evening we have engaged people who are responsible for going around picking the waste, segregated them from the other materials that we do not need, like plastics and solid materials, like food waste materials. And so in the evening by 3, those who have been engaged, like workers, they will go around, pick these things, segregate them, put them in sacks, waiting for a truck to come and pick it to the dumping site. And that will help us because formally, if it rains, because the market was flooded with this waste, the rainwater will carry them, send them into the lagoon, and it was having negative consequences on the sea, and that the people around the coast was having a problem. So, but for the Kanta Keepers, this thing has been going on. Again, we want to say that it has helped the community now. If you come, people we have engaged them, they are giving some stipends, at least I think they have included their financial status, and it's also helping the people. Again, like I've already said, when it rains, formally, the market is flooded because there was no any way that the rainwater will get access to the gutters because of the textile, but because of the Kanta Keepers now, when it rains, the market is free of flow of the rainwater. And so I can see it saying here and now that Kanta Keepers has doing a major work in terms of managing sanitation in the market.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Duchum. No, I just go on to the second question where I would like to pose to you both and then also Mr. Solomon. With how successful the Kanta Keepers program has been over the last couple of months since its inception, I wanted to find out also how you see the future, because I mean, it basically started as something that we wanted to pilot, and then it just took off to a very successful end. But I wanted to find out, with all of this discussion around EPR, how do you see the improvement or the future of Kanta Keepers if Kantamanto was getting direct EPR support to, carry this step forward?
Thank you, Samuel, again. And like I said, we ended the thing. This pilot is, I think that was September. So 2 months now, we went for a meeting and we said that because it has helped the Kantamanto community, want to continue with the program, and that we discussed about having a cooperative where it will be like an official sort of, so that at the end of the day, Kanta will get its own waste management, like Zoom Lion, so that we'll be able to manage the waste in Kantamanto, so that the Kantamanto market will be neat and clean, so that will attract a lot of persons to enter into. Because as of now, people do not come there because of the nature of the market and the waste that is there. So we are not able to attract a lot of people. But if you have our own waste management, like I've said, the place will be tidy up, it will be neat for everybody to come in and have a transact business with our people. So, and I think that will be possible, like EPA, because it involves a lot of money. It's a capital intensive matter, especially so as of now, the problem that Kanta Keepers are having is that it's only the truck. The truck is not consistent because the work of keeping sanitation is very difficult. it entails a lot of financial burden. So if we want to continue to have our own Kanta Keepers like Team Lion, then we have to get certain things that will help us be able to scale it up, like having a truck readily available so that when we pick the things, it will not be left idle, because the problem that we want to solve, if there's no truck to come and pick it away, that means that it will remain in the market.
Yeah.
If it is a car available, readily available, anytime we pick it, we just dump it so that it will end up where we want the Textile Waste to end. So we are by this time this way telling EPA that if they can help us financially to acquire trucks to be able to help us achieve our purpose and our aim, that will help us.
Thank you very much. Mr. Solomon, I would also like to pose this question to you as well. How you see, because you spoke a lot about, like, you know, how the mayor generally has been on top of this issue of waste management in the city of Accra. And then you also spoke to how, and previously spoke to how generally for most of the initiatives from the AMA, your work has mostly been on domestically generated waste, but the textile waste that we are seeing is not generated from Ghana or Accra to be exact. So how do you think EPR will generally support the city's initiatives and thinking around waste management, specifically on textile waste?
Sure. So for me, from where I sit, the key word here is sustainability. So like Kanta Keepers, we gave ourselves some 6 months pilot scheme, and we realized how impactful it was for us. With that, extended producer responsibility schemes to support the operational expenditure, I mean the OPEX of the management, definitely we cannot make a headway. And here I'm talking about just logistics to manage the problem just midway in the waste value chain. For instance, if you pick the entire textile waste value chain, right from the source of generation, which is Katamanto Market, through the storage and collection, and then transportation, that is where the Kanta Keepers program ended. But we left out other upstream management like treatment and final disposal. So in treatment, there was a whooping gap to the extent that we've collected or source separated the textile garments. Textile Kanta Keepers have gotten them clean enough, put them into the sacks or fill the truck with it. The truck is supposed to transport these items to the processing factory or a processing site, so that the residuals that will come from the processing site are then also transported from the treatment site to the final site, which is the landfill or the dump site. Because like I said in my previous presentation, getting untreated textile waste to the dump sites contributes in an astronomical manner in building up the void space or filling up the landfill, because compaction very difficult at the site. And so nobody will want to waste land by sending untreated or unprocessed garments or textile waste to the landfill sites. So this is where we want to urge very much on all stakeholders that have advocacy voices to add to us, because the problem we are talking about here, like I've always been espousing in all my presentations anywhere I go, is that this is an outlier that is generating the problem and not because of us. So definitely, as a country, we are stressed up. We are lower middle income, or I don't even know which brackets we fall in now. Yes, so lower middle income or lower income country. The mega taxes that we pay go into funding education, because the government is pursuing free education at the basic level. The government is paying for that. It is also going into health facilities. Currently, the government is saying they are going to add certain diseases like terminal ailments like renal failure and things to the national health insurance. We are talking about agriculture, a whole lot of fiscal space that is consumed by the meager taxes that we pay. So there's not much that is left again in the form of budget to support all these programs and schemes that will make sure our beaches are clean and then we get the ocean pollution off. Definitely, it is just justifiable that whatever is coming from the global north, whether well sorted, whether excellently sorted, will definitely come to East End of life on our shores. So there's no point in keeping the money right at the global north and shipping it to us and say that, yes, we've sorted it very well. And so if it goes through a second and third life and somebody buys them, definitely it will worn out and then it will end up on our shores. So this is where the disconnect is and then the imbalance is. And I feel that, yes, it is a good step. European Commission is considering a review of the extended producer responsibility scheme, but then the method and then how the PROs will come to terms with us and understand the dynamics of the problem, and also the fact that we are in a global world. If you think the problem has left the shores of the global north, it is ending up just close by. And so if nothing is done about it, definitely it will evolve in what we call environmental catastrophe. And by that time, the cost of mitigating that catastrophe will be very, very, very huge. That will cripple a lot of economies all over the world. So I don't know. Kanta Keepers, the key word here is sustainability. How to get sustainable means of finances to get the operational expenditure. Like he was saying, getting the trucks to manage the waste, you cannot manage this waste by getting second-hand used vehicles. And that is what we are using. It comes with very high maintenance costs, and the failure rate is very, very great. But then if we are able to get brand new or fairly new vehicles, then you know that you can plan over the next 6 to 10 years. And by so doing, the activity will be sustainable in terms of the fact that definitely it will help to keep the market clean, like he's saying. They will get a lot of clientele, a lot of revenue will be generated. Some of the revenue will be saved to go to maintain and pay for the services of the Kanta Keepers, and then the equipment and fleet. And also, if possible, get the extended, what we call the CAPEX, that's the capital expenditure, to set up processing factories to deal with this garment textile waste. Readily available technology is the mechanical means of processing, either from fiber to fiber or from fiber to board. If you are looking at the polyesters, it is from fiber to board. We are not reinventing the wheel, neither is it a novelty. It is already being practiced in Korea. We saw one in Finland, and then I think Turkey also. So definitely, this involves a lot of money, and then we can be able to close in the loop in terms of circularity on the textile waste. Source of funding, very key. And we are handicapped, and definitely schemes like extended producer responsibility will go a long way to make sure that we nip this problem in the bud. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solomon. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our short presentation. I think our time is up, so I'll hand up over again to Ariana. Thank you.
Thank you, Sami. Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, everyone. It was very insightful. And yes, I would jump directly to giving over the mic again to Branson so that he can present the Stop Waste Colonialism campaign. Yeah, Branson, you can take it over from now.
Yes. Hello. Thank you,
Hello.
and thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Manager and Engineer Noy. I think it really set the stage for what EPR is about and why at this moment it is so critically important. Just to clarify, we are even past the pilot phase. We are continuing to fund Kanta Keepers operations to ensure that it doesn't stop. But that is very much why, as Engineer Noy has pointed out, it is very much why getting EPR to be globally accountable is so important. So that is a perfect segue to discuss our campaign, Stop Waste Colonialism. And I did see there's actually a really relevant question, Sourcey, from Circular Economy that you've parked in the chat. I'm going to touch on that a little bit here as well. It's fundamental to the question of the definition of waste, as I said previously. So what is waste colonialism if we're trying to stop it? Just to be very clear, we're not saying that there shouldn't be reuse. We're saying that waste colonialism is the issue. And what is that issue? Is when one group of people uses waste and pollution to dominate another group of people in their homeland. Now, I want to give an example of this, and France is going to take the brunt of this example here because they've had the longest running policy. In 2021, Refashion brought in around 51 million euros in EPR fees. That actually averaged to about 1 cent per garment, which, as Ariana, you mentioned, is not very much money. In 2021, 80% of the clothing collected and sorted for reuse in France was exported, most of it to the continent of Africa. Every minute, in fact, France exports 599 garments to the continent of Africa. Yet, none, a big 0% of the funds collected under the EPR program have left Europe to go to communities like Cantamonto, who ultimately manage France's textile waste. Now, a little asterisk to that is that actually the majority of clothes leaving France for the continent of Africa is going to Togo, which is Ghana's next door neighbor. But nonetheless, the point remains the same, that this, as far as we see it, is essentially a policy of waste colonialism. Let us send you our stuff and not send any of the money that we collected to manage that stuff with. So what are we trying to do when we say stop waste colonialism? Well, the principle of our campaign has 3 points, or is based on 3 understandings, and I want to make sure that we arrive at the same understanding here today. Cantamonto and global secondhand markets like it do circularity. From sorting operations and preparation for reuse, which under the Waste Framework Directive, if we dig into what the EU is talking about now, is actually supposed to be supported by EPR, that is preparation for reuse, repair, remanufacturing, and recycling. Global secondhand markets drive circularity with scarce resources, often in debt and in dangerous conditions. Now, every garment, from our perspective, when we have hundreds of billions of garments, trillions perhaps, already in use and in circulation, every garment is waste until proven otherwise. There is an excess of clothing, and we need to be realistic about why we are producing something with scarce planetary resources when we have enough of the thing to begin with. So a policy about waste management would be centered on this basic understanding. And then waste should not transit borders without accompanying EPR funding. It completely defeats the point of paying for waste management to collect material, ship it abroad, and say, all right, our job is done. We have now gotten it to the OA, without thinking about what is going on in the OA. So how does that understanding come into play from a policy perspective? For us, this is about internalizing the cost of waste management. The EPR fee must align with the eco-modulated waste management cost throughout the global reverse supply chain, and must financially incentivize alternatives to linear waste practices. For us, as Ariana, as you pointed to already, that EPR fee, please forgive my American here, I use the $sign, but that EPR fee should start at 50 cents. That's for a newly produced garment as a floor rate for EPR programs. Because when you look at what those internalized costs of waste management are, that's actually what it is at a bare minimum in the best case scenario. Global accountability. To the point of money moving across borders, if the clothes are moving across borders, EPR must align with the reality of how waste flows around the world. distributing funds to enable circular infrastructure in the global south as well as in the global north. We are not saying this should be mutually exclusive. Oh, money is coming to Ghana or it's all staying in Germany. That is not the question. The question is, how do we ensure that the EPR fee is holistic in scope so that there is enough funding to move where the clothes go to each of the communities, to each of the organizations and businesses that are actually dealing with this material along the entire value chain, just as Engineer Noy has spoken to. And finally, being a truly catalytic policy would require EPR to focus on volume reduction and disclosure. Well, beginning with disclosure and ending up at reduction, meaning if EPR is supposed to be catalyzing circularity, it needs to place some targets there. We need to understand how this policy can be used to create an alternative to offset new production. We believe that that can be managed within the EPR fee based on a reduction target of what we believe should be 40% over the next 5 years. Now, important to ground this understanding is that the waste crisis is not caused by a lack of recycling technology. The waste crisis is caused by overproduction. When consumer fashion is disposable, waste is part of the business model. If you are making a new garment with the intention that somebody is going to wear it 3 to 6 to 8 times maximum, that is a disposable garment. So waste is part of that business model. It is not about not having recycling. It is about the fact that you are making something that is waste to begin with. As I said before, every new garment is waste until proven otherwise. If we extend that mentality, waste is what Kantamanto cannot profit from. Our estimation is that it costs around $1.58 or approximately €1.50 per item, not per bale, but per item to recirculate material when it comes into Kantamanto market. That means the cost to buy the bale that a retailer pays. That means the cost to transport it, to store it, to open it up, to wash material, to hang it on stalls, to pay for waste management services. All of a retailer's costs add up to around $1.58 per item. In Ghana cedis, that's around, I think about 22-ish, 22, 23 Ghana cedis, depending as to the day of the week, the exchange rate. If costs are more than the value of that item, then that item is considered waste. This is a fundamental economic principle. This happens in a normal first-hand retail environment. If we have had something in our store for a month and it hasn't sold, it's taking up floor space, it is costing us money, we need to get rid of that material. We need to discard it. Under the definition of waste, written into law at the EU level, at the Waste Framework Directive level, an item is considered waste if the holder of that item intends to discard it. So if you are not making money from something, or it will cost you more money to sell or hold on to than you could possibly make for it, then you intend to discard it. Fundamentally, that is waste. So if we extend that mentality a little bit further, the problem cannot be sorted out. Just as Engineer Noy said, this is not something that we solve by simply sorting. And we need to understand that there is currently a loophole in policy where the European landscape, I don't want to go into too much detail here, we can save this for question and answer, but just to note, there are actually two conflicting policy frameworks presently. Well, the Waste Shipment Regulation actually enacted, the Waste Framework Directive, which is up for revisions. There's kind of a loophole that has been created here, which is saying that you cannot export waste, and then the other saying that you can just declare that material is not waste. And I think that that is not really the intention of what these laws are aiming for, which is to support waste management, not to say, to just unilaterally declare what is and what is not waste. And I think part of what's important here is recognizing that the definition of waste within circularity is not binary. So our job as folks interested in this topic is to bring this conversation and this nuance into the discussion about policy, to say this is not an either or, despite our name as an organization. This is not something is waste or it is a product. It is to say that in a circular system, we have to shift our thinking about the idea of waste to begin with. And it's not that you can declare something waste at one point and then declare it a product at another point. It's to say that you have an entire ecosystem and different perspectives along that entire ecosystem. How are we incorporating that? You can't incorporate those different perspectives with a linear and a binary mindset. So just a little snapshot, sorting is taking place in Contamonto. Not that material isn't sorted already, but this is the decision point where something goes from a bale, which is weight, to items, which is what the actual product, if it is a product of reuse, is. That is the point. In this retailer's stall, this is Abena, in her stall, that is where that decision is made. So how can policy align with that decision-making process? It goes back with this framework, says internalize the cost of waste management, start at 50 cents, close that gap globally. Now, just to show the French policy, which is actually one of the smaller gaps when you look at a lot of the OECD countries, the French policy, we developed a framework called Circular Finance Factor, which looks at basically the number of net garments moving in and out of a country under the HS code HS 6309, which is secondhand clothing, and the GDP per capita. So it's basically how much money does a country have per garment that is moving in and out of its borders. And France has exponentially more money than Ghana does to deal with this issue. So globally accountable policy would close that gap. That gap is clearly enormous, as you can see. And that, again, does not mean that it is all moving, all the funding is moving to Ghana or elsewhere. It is looking at what are the tiers, who are the hands, literally, who are touching garments, and how are we creating a system that is equitably supporting those steps along the path. We believe that at least 29% should be moving into reuse markets globally if that is where clothes are going. And that some money, at least 10%, should be left over to pay for environmental remediation work to clean up the mess that's already been created. Because remember, a new garment being sold, paying EPR, is actually offsetting an item from somebody's closet that already existed. So what is going into waste management is not immediately the new item that was sold, it is the garment that has been offset. We already have enough clothing. So we're just talking about, really at this point, over the next 5 to 10, 15 years, the legacy garments that are already in circulation or in disuse sitting in someone's closet. And that leads us to volume reduction, which I spoke to before. But just to note that all the work that we're doing, this photo is actually a little bit outdated. We're now removing over 20 tons of clothing waste every week, which is 10 tons is 37 times the Olympic world record, Olympic weightlifting record. I guess now that's 74 times the Olympic weightlifting record. We are lifting a lot of material, but we are no match for infinite production volumes. So this really begins with an understanding of how much, if we're talking about waste management, how much material, how many garments are we having to manage? Right? If we do not have this understanding, how are we going to craft policy? How are we going to craft targets? How are we going to hold anybody accountable toward moving to circularity? So we set this goal of having 100 brands, including one big fashion brand, speak volumes. What we mean by that is to publish their production volumes. They can publish it with us, they can publish it on their website, they can publish it in their sustainability reports, but what we'd like to see is for this to be a default metric of sustainability moving forward. To say, if we are serious about waste management, we have to be serious about the waste we are producing, and that begins with our production units. And that is what we are going to publish and disclose every year. So we've called for this publicly. We've had some folks join us, and ultimately this shifts the conversation from one of disposable to one of value, right? It's about shifting the business model where we have increasing units and less value. In an oversupplied economy where that clothing doesn't hold value, it changes the rules of the game, it reverses that race to the bottom, and it says, let's look at increased value per unit and fewer units. That is what this can do in the long range with EPR. And in the short range, most immediately, it can ensure that those externalized costs are actually paid for. So the devil is really in the detail here to make sure we understand what all of those costs are. Are we going all the way into the markets, and what happens after the markets? What happens after a garment is sold and ends up in a rural community? Who is covering the costs of managing that waste, or are we just kicking that further down the line? Who is determining that? Is it the PRO made up of brands, or is it voices in an inclusive system from around the world? Are we looking at intrinsic or extrinsic durability when we think about costs? A polyester garment may last forever, but is somebody going to wear it forever? And what is the cost of managing that when someone decides that they don't really want to wear a $5 shirt any longer. And then are we looking at the net or relative footprint of those garments, right? If you're producing, and Ariana, you pointed to this before quite astutely, if you're producing 100 million garments, and you have each garment has a marginal increase in its recycled content, but you produce 110 million garments, you haven't actually changed your net impact as a company. And how is that factored in to the EPR scheme? How is traceability, knowing where things end up, different from responsibility, taking care of them wherever they end up? And I just close on this important point that we've learned and seen in action throughout the policy making process, which is that as policy is made by the people who show up. So all of us on this call, I think, are in a position to continue agitating, to continue putting voices into this process to make sure it is inclusive and make sure it is answering those questions of who is being heard within this in the most holistic manner. And that brings me to Sayorsi's question, which is about contesting the question of what waste is, right? And I think fundamentally, you know, Janet, you touched on this a little bit about reporting based on sort of the self-interest of the reporting party. And I believe that there is a highly political conversation around waste, in part because of the loophole or lack of loophole that is written in between the Waste Shipment Regulation and the Waste Framework Directive in Europe at the moment. So there's a significant concern. If everything is regarded as waste, can we ship it under the Waste Shipment Regulation? That's actually a valid concern. I share that concern. But I don't think that denying the issue and saying, oh, everything is perfect in Ghana or in Kenya is the way to address and have an inclusive policy. I think that what we have to do is bring more nuance into the conversation to say that, you know what, the reality is that most of this material is in fact wearable, but it is not being worn. That is the challenge here. We can't determine what is waste and what is not waste, what will be used, what will have costs entailed with it that are currently externalized. We cannot determine that aside from the end reuse market. And that is where we need policy to end up, is including those voices from the end reuse market, not from where things cross the border at customs, either on the exporting or importing side, but from where the individual garments are put back into circulation or determined to need that support of EPR. So thank you all.
Thank you, Branson. Thank you so much. You raised so many points. And I believe there are also a lot of questions, but I would start our 10 minutes Q&A round with the question that we left open in the last round, which is from Herizo Robin. What is the state of investment made nowadays to independent designers who push not only the discussion, but also challenge business models and innovation? They are also part of the solution and unfortunately don't have enough support or resources. And I believe this question to be addressed to both Janet and Branson. Robin? So
yes.
Yeah, great. So so maybe Janet wants to start.
Oh, sorry, I was just reading the question again.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So from my discussions with some of the few upcycling brands and initiatives that I have had a conversation with, there's really they really have to push themselves out and to look for these funds. But otherwise there's really there's not much that is happening for them. And so it's really tough to continue working on the same model, without having to sell themselves out. But I think that's why there's a few of such initiatives that exist. And one brand that I did not include in the presentation exclusively sources from the market and makes bags, but all of the money that they have, they don't even apply to grants or anything. So they have to depend on the sales that they make to further expand their businesses. So when the OAF Foundation is trying to push for this wonderful work in this space, then more and more initiatives are encouraged to put themselves out and find ways that they can scale up and also inspire other people in this space that may want to get into the business as well.
Yeah, I can just add to that, Janet. One of the components, and I didn't do a very good job at the top when presenting the work that we do. One of the aspects of the work that we do is actually run a community business incubator, and that is actually sort of the flagship of the work that we're also doing with UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and it is something, including even the Kanta Keepers program, that currently is we're trying to model what is possible under EPR. So I do think that support, be it through an innovation fund, which for instance Refashion actually runs, but it's only in France, wherever the funding may end up, I do actually think that support for independent designers who are creating that alternative, particularly if it is using secondhand clothing, if it is recirculating material, if it is looking at remanufacturing, is critical. And that's where, for us, it's also about building that bridge with the folks who are doing that in Contamonto to access new markets and to really walk the walk of shifting that business model from one of volumes to value. So changing what someone can sell something for based off of quality and market access from less than $1 to perhaps more than $100, and that really can help shift business models entirely. And that's work that I think is necessary to fund. And yes, it is underfunded because I think there is often hyped interest in technology that I think forgets often that the greatest technology in recirculating clothes, so far as we're concerned, is what we already have. I mean, the sewing machine and innovative thinking around remanufacturing is the first point on the waste hierarchy after reuse, and we need to continue to remind ourselves that.
Yeah, I would like to add up maybe from the German point of view. I don't know, Robin, where you come from, but if you're not from Germany, I mean, also here in Germany, there's no big funding of independent designers, so fashion designers that are work in a more sustainable way, that who are doing upcycling, they're underfunded. There are sometimes some like opportunities to maybe ask for fundings in like more environmental agency in Germany, the Federal Environmental Agency, but it's always has to be connected with some kind of research of like academic way of generating data on a specific topic or with a pilot. So the work itself of being just a designer working with textile waste is underfunded in Germany as well. And there have been some trials, and there are still, of course, pilots from bigger companies and brands who are trying to make upcycling, for example, more standardized, and so that the business model, like the typical business model, would work also for upcycling. Some examples are there, but most of them they failed. So of course the big brands trying out like to support like this kind of designing, yeah, they tried it out, and then it, of course, is not as remunerative as it should be in the financial plans, and they close up the projects quite quickly. So yeah, just to give also the point of view from Germany here, and maybe Europe as well.
Yeah, I think it's a shame because when you talk about waste and upcycling, it's not just about material. It's about a shifting business model also, and innovation about the business model itself, right? So it's not just about fancy things about material and upcycling. It's go way beyond about the system of how our fashion world function actually. And I think it's really crucial. And when you speak about founding those people, those independent designer, it's really crucial because at the end we need to have a strategy of the bottom up strategy instead of always, going through policy to top to the bottom. So it needs to be inclusive, I think, and sometimes I just think that designers are left behind, and but I think it's crucial because they are the future of the new generation, and how we're gonna see the world, how we're gonna frame another way of working.
Yeah, definitely it's about cultural change, but definitely in this consumption-based model that we are living nowadays, creativity is definitely in general underfunded. So yeah, definitely every single person thinking in a different way and doing things in a more holistic way, looking at circular economy, they should be funded and should be uplifted by communities, by economies. And I think we are in one line here, thinking in the same direction. So thank you for your question, Robin. And I would jump on to the question of Alice, who is asking, while working on solutions for dealing with textile waste, is there also measures on a national level for letting enter less textile from global north? I remember one country tried to stop all secondhand imports, and unfortunately there were consequences from global north about other commercial trades, so the country was forced to import textile. And maybe, I don't know if Janet or Branson or even Solomon, if still there, would like to take this question.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. Branson, will you come in or I should go ahead?
Feel free, engineer.
Yeah. So yes, that's it. Definitely the exporters at the global north also have an interest when it comes to this subject matter. So here in Ghana, we are also facing the same thing. They see the work we are doing together with the All Foundation as a threat, and they are going all the way using all sort of things to mount pressure. But I think that is not the way to go. For me, from where I sit, what we need to do is to make sure that we define the various stages and scope of the EPR schemes, and then we follow it through to make sure that we close in the loop on the entire waste value chain, where we know as a country we have the capacity to be able to manage very well this quantum of imported secondhand clothing in the system. Once that is established, we will now have to put in policies to check the overproduction. Because if everybody else is doing it, definitely the designers, the brands will be mindful of the quantities that they churn out, because definitely there will be no space else to send the excess to. And together, it will be a win-win situation for everybody, both global north and global south. Because definitely there are people who are making a livelihood and a living from the business aspects of this. What we need to solve is the environmental impact and then the socioeconomic impact that this brings. So definitely, it's not like for one country to impose sanctions on another by saying, no. Let's deal with this holistically. And then we are, at the end of the day, able to make sure that, yes, maybe 50 tons can come in a day, and then for that matter, we have a process, we have the factories, we have the upcycling, we have whatever means we've put in place to be able to manage whatever excesses that will come from it, and nothing will be left into the environment to cause any damage. And once we do that, right at the ports, we know how much to check and then prevent excesses from coming. And that will have a ripple effect on the fast fashion trade, because definitely we will not be allowed to overproduce, because there will be nowhere else to send. Whereas we have an advantage of having some land space to be able to manage industry to process. I know land is an issue in the global north. Not much space is there. So whilst solving this problem at the global south, it is also helping the global north because definitely they will not have to look for scarce land to process these excesses should there be pushback on everybody. So for me, it should be a win-win situation and not an imposition of a sort. And the sure way to go is to create the means of sustainability by making sure that EPR is one of the main sources of funding the entire waste value chain when it comes to circularity in textile waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you very much. I think this was the last question from the chat, and because we are running a little bit late, then I would close up this Q&A session. I would like to thank all the speakers that are not staying with us in the second phase, in the workshop, more interactive phase of today. And yeah, so thank you so much for being here with us and talking to our audience. And yeah, was fantastic to see you, Branson. Thank you. Solomon, you as well. I think Semi will stay and Janet will also stay for the workshop session. But if not, yeah, it was lovely meeting you and having you here. Bye. We are going to keep collaborating. So I'm super happy that we are going to have more occasions to work together and talk more and work on these topics. For everybody else who is staying, before we go into the break, I would ask you in the break time to actually help us filling out this feedback form. It's only 3 questions, so please take the feedback before leaving the screen. But also I would ask you to maybe change a name you umbenennen, like change the name in your profile so that we can see quite clearly from which company, organization, NGO you come, and then we can better work together during the workshop, as we are going to put you in some breakout rooms at one point. Yes, thank you very much. I would say we take 5 minutes break from now, and we see each other at 4:25 our time. So in 5 minutes, 25.